A forester walked past a lake in the Karelian forest. It was evening, late April, ice still on the water. He checked a small dam, noted nothing unusual, and walked 7 kilometers to camp for the night. In the morning, he walked back the same way, and the lake was gone. Not frozen, not drained slowly. Gone. In its place, a raw crater with steep, collapsed walls, cutting into the shore like something had reached up and pulled the water down. Where a 2-kilometer lake had been the evening before, there was now a hole in the ground and a strange dark stain spreading across the sky above it. The forester's name was Vasily Brodsky. What he saw that morning in 1961 still doesn't have an agreed explanation, and the case file it created has been rewritten, relocated, and half erased for 60 years. This is the mystery of Korbozero, deep in Soviet Karelia, in a place so remote it takes hours on foot to reach. One of the strangest natural events of the 20th century happened, and almost nobody in the West has ever heard of it. Let's set the scene properly. Korbozero sits in the Podoj district of Karelia, near Lake Onega, in dense taiga forest. In 1961, the nearest settlement was a small logging village, hours away on foot. Brodsky worked for the local timber enterprise, walking the same shoreline routes for years. On the evening of April 27th, he passed the lake exactly as he always had. Nothing unusual. He continued on, camped, and returned the next morning, April 28th, around 8 o'clock. What he found stopped him where he stood. The lake, roughly 2 kilometers long, was simply not there. In its place was a fresh pit with steep, raw walls, the earth still wet and unweathered, as if it had been torn open hours earlier. And above the empty basin, witnesses in the area described something almost impossible to classify, a luminous, jellyfish-shaped glow hanging in the sky, pulsing, before drifting off toward Lake Onega and dissolving into the gray clouds on the horizon. Investigators who later visited the site found something else, and this detail is the one that has kept the case alive for 6 decades. Scattered around the crater, small, hard, round objects, frozen spheres described by some witnesses as metallic or glass-like. Unlike anything naturally found in that forest, Soviet researchers collected samples. Word spread that laboratory analysis couldn't identify their composition. In a country where UFO reports were officially treated as Western propaganda, a vanished lake with strange glowing lights and unexplained artifacts was, quietly, a very inconvenient story. The case reached a wider audience decades later through a Soviet writer and former military engineer named Vladimir Demidov, who documented Korbozero in his memoir. His account treated the case as a serious, unsolved phenomenon, a lake gone overnight, a light in the sky, and physical evidence nobody could explain. For years, that version circulated through Russian UFO literature as one of the country's strongest documented cases. No aliens claimed, no little green men. Just an event that official science had never adequately addressed. Here is where honesty requires us to slow down, because this case has a second act that most viral retellings leave out. Decades later, geologists and independent researchers went back to Korbozero with modern eyes, and the boring, earthbound explanation started to look uncomfortably solid. Karelia sits on ground riddled with underground channels, sinkholes, and karst-like drainage systems carved through soft glacial soil over thousands of years. Lakes in this terrain can, under the right conditions, drain suddenly through a collapsing underground channel, the same way a bathtub empties once a plug gives way. A slow, unnoticed sinkhole beneath the lakebed could finally give out in one catastrophic collapse, in a single night, while nobody was there to see it happen. That would explain the crater. It would also explain the mud. Divers sent down in 1961 reported the water was almost completely opaque, thick with disturbed sediment. Researchers who later studied similar landslide events on other Karelian rivers documented the exact same thing. A sudden slope failure sends a plume of mud downstream for kilometers, turning clear water the color of coffee for days. That is not evidence of anything exotic. It is exactly what a collapsing lakebed looks like from the outside. And the mysterious spheres. Skeptical researchers offered an answer so unglamorous it almost feels like an insult to the legend. Cold, wet cement dust, or fine construction sediment, common near logging operations, forms hard round pellets when it freezes in droplet form, the same texture and shape that 1961 investigators, working without modern lab equipment, mistook for something engineered. Once you know to look for it, the impossible artifact becomes a known industrial byproduct doing something slightly unusual in freezing weather. So what actually happened above the lake that night? This is the part even the skeptics don't fully explain away. A sudden ground collapse releasing trapped gas and water vapor under pressure could, in theory, produce a visible glow or mist in the right light and temperature conditions. But "in theory" is doing a lot of work in that sentence, and nobody has replicated the described jellyfish-shaped light with a purely geological event. The glow remains the one piece of testimony that neither side of this argument has fully claimed. What we're left with is a genuinely rare split verdict. On one side, a serious, well-documented geological process, karst collapse, that explains a vanished lake, a fresh crater, and clouded water more completely than any other natural event in this catalog of mysteries. On the other side, two witness details, the light in the sky and the unidentified frozen spheres, that even committed skeptics have only partially accounted for decades after the fact. Soviet authorities never opened this case the way they classified Shivray or buried the paperwork on Dyatlov Pass. Korbozero was, if anything, almost too remote to bother covering up. It simply drifted, undocumented, into forestry logs and a handful of witness accounts, until one writer with a military background decided the story deserved a chapter, and it slipped out from behind the Iron Curtain into UFO literature that Western researchers have almost never touched. Today, Korbozero exists again. The lake refilled naturally within a couple of years, feeding new water through the same river system that once vanished into the ground. If you visited it today, you'd find a quiet triangular lake in the Karelian forest, exactly like thousands of others in that region, giving no sign that it once disappeared overnight in front of a startled forester and left a light in the sky that nobody has ever fully explained. What do you think happened over Korbozero that night? A karst collapse doing something science hasn't fully modeled yet? Or something the Soviet Union simply never wanted to look at twice? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe, because next time we go back underground into a Soviet nuclear disaster the state hid for 30 years and a city that was erased from every map in the country.